Okay, with apologies to anyone watching for being 5 minutes late, we'll start. I'd like to welcome everyone today, members, officers, and members of the public, to this meeting of the Planning Control Committee. Before the meeting starts, I would like to invite the committee member and I always get that wrong. I'm going to have to change the punctuation on this. I would like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to explain how proceedings will work. Susan.
Good evening. Can I confirm the following officer joining us remotely can hear us and that we can hear them? Tom Ray?
Yeah, present.
Good evening.
Hi.
If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you may speak. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room, and the result will be visible on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the chair will have the casting vote. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? I will now hand back to the chair.
Thanks, Susan. Item 1, apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Ruth Brown. I haven't got a substitute member listed, so no. Okay. Are there any further apologies? Nope. Item 2, minutes of the meeting 4th of September 2025. I propose that we take as a true I propose that we take as read and approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of September 2025 as a true record of proceedings. May I have a seconder? Councillor Ian Mantle, thank you. And any comments on the minutes? No. Then if we can vote on accepting the minute, all those in favour of accepting the minutes?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Item 3, notification of other business. There is none. Item 4, Chair's announcements. 1, recording. In accordance with Council policy, this meeting is being recorded. The recording will be available both on the Council's YouTube channel as well as on the Council's ModGov site alongside the documents from this meeting. Declaration of interest. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under the Chair's announcements on the agenda. Debate procedure. In order to move to a debate on an item, we will require a proposer and seconder for a motion at the appropriate time in the meeting. This should take into account the information in the officer's report and will follow the officer's presentation and any public presentations, including member advocates, as well as any questions of the officer and points of clarification from the public presenters. As a reminder for members, should you wish to propose a motion contrary to the recommendations included in the officer's report, you will be required to provide clear and evidence reasons for this proposal. Section 4.8.23a. For the purposes of clarification, in order to vote on an agenda item in this meeting, a member must be present for the entirety of the debate and consideration for that item. If a member leaves the room at any point of the item, they will not be able to vote. Meeting cut-off. As outlined under 4.8.24g of the Council's Constitution, if the meeting proceeds to 10:30 p.m, the item being considered at that time will be the final item considered at tonight's meeting. If it proceeds to 10:30 tonight, I will be very surprised, but who knows. The remaining business will be deferred to the next meeting on Thursday, the 23rd of October. Public participation. There is no public participation at this meeting. Item 6, and here's Stephen, application TPO 00221, land at Crouch Green Wood and Churchwood, 3 House Lane, Codicott. I have agreed to defer this item to a future meeting committee due to issues experienced with the notification letters. Item 7, application 2501834S73, land at Heath Road, Breachwood Green, Hertfordshire. Tom Ray, Anne McDonald, and Anne McDonald. So Tom Ray to present, I believe it is online. Tom, you're out there somewhere.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. There are no updates to the committee report this evening, Chairman. Just to confirm that this application is only before the committee because the site area is slightly over the half-hectare area threshold by which this matter would normally be delegated to officers. And in this particular case, the site area is 0.56 hectares, just for members' information. As there are no updates, Chair, if I could go straight to the slides, please.
The slides are up. Can you see them?
No, I can't actually, but I'll see if I can find them myself.
We can see them here. So
Yeah, just one moment. I've got them here actually. Okay, so slide one. This is the coloured map. Shows the site outline in red, with housing to the north and the south, and Heath Road to the east. The site is within the village boundary and is allocated as a housing site KW1 in the North Herts local plan. Next slide, please. Again, this is the site location plan shown on this slide. There is a permissive right-of-way that runs along the top northern boundary of the site, linking Heath Road to the east with a public footpath, Kings Walden number 8 to the west of the site. Next slide, please. This slide shows the approved site layout for the development, and the only two houses affected by this particular request to alter condition 5 in relation to the restriction on roof additions are plots number 1 and 10, which are those coloured blue on this plan located at the front of the site, either side of the access road, looking towards Heath Road on the right-hand side of that plan. Next slide, please. This slide shows a photograph of the site as it is today, being developed for the 10 houses approved under the outline and reserved matters applications. The access road and its turning head, together with its base course, has been constructed and various drainage connections have been provided. In terms of the planning conditions, all of the relevant pre-commencement conditions placed on this development have been submitted to and discharged by the local planning authority. Therefore, the development has commenced lawfully. Next slide, please. A similar photograph of the northern part of the access, showing the development underway. Next slide, please. And this, again, is a similar photograph of the site access in its entirety and the road frontage. The access road shown here will be 5.5 meters wide throughout the development site. And next slide, please. And finally, this photograph shows the retained mature trees in the southeast corner of the site, which will form part of the biodiversity net gain and public open space feature as part of the development. So in conclusion, Chair, as I've mentioned in the report, the relaxation of condition 5 for these two plots would allow roof dormers on the rear elevations only, and these would be limited by all of the other restrictions under the legislation which I've set out in paragraph 4.3.4 of my report, which include a limit on the volume of any dormers and matching materials, etc., being maintained. So it's considered that the request from the developers is reasonable in the circumstances, and therefore would ask the committee to support the recommendation as set out. And I'm happy to answer any questions, Chairman, if necessary. That's the end of my presentation.
Thanks very much, Tom. Do members have any questions for the planning officer? Louise Peace.
Hello, Tom.
Hi.
Does this mean that the developer applicant could construct plots 1 and 10 with a dormer window as part of the build?
Yes, the applicant is seeking permitted development rights for roof alterations for these two plots only.
Okay. Thank you.
You're fine.
Go on then. Yeah, I think the only thing it wasn't clear to me whether it would be the developer building these two houses with the dormer already present and sort of extended, or whether it would be sold and then the householder who buys the house would have the right to then do the dormer themselves.
Oh, I see what you mean, Councillor. Yeah, I apologise. It would be the right of the house owner once the development is completed. Once because permitted development rights don't exist until it becomes an occupied dwelling. So it will be the new occupiers.
Thank you, Tom.
Councillor Martin Prescott.
Thank you. I'm curious. I didn't participate in the original decision on this, or I certainly don't recall doing so, and wondered why we conditioned to the removal of the permitted development rights in the first place. What was the rationale behind that condition? Because we would have had to add that condition, or the officer would have added the condition specifically. And the sort of supplementary to that would be, if we added the condition in the first place, why are we comfortable now to remove it? Anybody can answer. Feel free.
Councillor, if I can help you on that. The officers considered with the outline, at the outline stage, it wasn't necessary to remove permitted development rights for these dwellings. And therefore there was no such restriction on the outline permission. When the Reserve Matters application came in back in April, the committee had some concerns, which I've set out in paragraph 4.3.2 of the agenda report, concerning the parking issues if these dwellings were to be increased in size through permitted development rights, and the affordability of the dwellings, and amenity space, and a few other considerations. And through that discussion at that meeting, it became clear that members wanted to restrict permitted development rights for loft conversions in order to take account of those concerns.
So if I may, the second part of my question again was, what's changed? Presumably those concerns are still valid.
Well, as I said in the report, Councillor, this particular application is just looking at 2 of the dwellings. The developer seems happy to keep that restriction for the remaining 8 dwellings, but is seeking a partial relaxation for these 2 only. But I've gone through those issues in my report. And in terms of parking, for example, there's plenty of parking within the site for each dwelling off the access road. There are 5 visitor parking spaces, and if necessary, further visitors could park within the access road. It has quite a substantial width at 5.5 meters, so I don't think there would be a parking problem arising from these 2 dwellings inserting more habitable accommodation within the roof. In terms of the affordability of the dwellings, I don't think that's a particular issue that can be considered at this stage, because the reason for putting that condition on, as I've said in 4.31 of my report, was in the interests of the character and amenities of the area and to comply with policy D1 of the local plan. Now, policy D1 relates to design and appearance and sustainability issues. It doesn't relate to any affordability issues. So I think the concerns of members being that if these dwellings were to be further enlarged, they would be even less affordable to local people, but I don't think that would be an issue that we could consider on this occasion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bryony May.
Thank you. In paragraph 4.3.5, I took the impression from that, and I just wanted to check my understanding was correct, that even without our decision tonight, the purchasers could develop the loft into extra bedrooms anyway, because of the permitted development rights that do exist on those.
Yes,
properties. Is that right?
that's correct, Councillor. There's a further class within permitted development rights, Class C, that relates to any other alterations other than dormers, and so that would allow, for example, roof lights and the internal conversion of these roofs to bedrooms. So members may need to be aware of that in their decision this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Emma Fernandez.
I'm not sure whether I missed this in the report or not, but the two plots, which are plot 1 and 10, how big are the houses? How many bedrooms do they have as they currently stand without any extension into the loft area?
Through you, Chair, there are 4-bedroom dwellings within the approved plan.
So they're quite substantial dwellings already.
Yeah, I mean, there are 4-bedroom dwellings, as are all of the dwellings. They're all 4-bedroom dwellings within this development.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bryony May.
Thank you. Different question. Do you have any idea why these particular 2 properties have been identified out of the 10 for this? Because I think 4 of them are the same design, aren't they?
Yeah.
I just wondered whether there was any thought behind why it was those 2 in particular.
No, there's been no reasoning given by the applicant with this application on that issue.
Councillor Martin Prescott.
Really just following on from the previous question, would this therefore set a precedent for other, well, presumably householders at the time, to come along and say, well, he's got extended permitted development rights, why can't I have them? Tom?
That would, yes, I mean, that would set a precedent for somebody else approaching us to remove their permitted development rights through a similar application, or people could make a planning application, for example, to extend their dwellings. And we would look at each application on its merits, of course.
But you'd have the precedent then in place.
Yes, there would be a precedent, yes, of dormers within the roofscapes of these dwellings.
Thank you.
Do we have any further questions for Tom? Any further questions? Tom, do you wish to come back at all in response to any of the questions?
No, Chair, I'm happy with the questions that I've answered.
Thank you. So the officer's recommendation is to grant permission. Unless members are minded to propose a different recommendation on this item, along with material planning reasons, I shall be proposing that we grant permission. Therefore, I propose that we grant permission for the reasons set out in the report. Can I have a seconder?
Happy to second and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Fernandez. Right, do we have any debate, please? I have Councillor Claire Billing.
It's not actually debate, it's more a question to Stephen, I think. What's the kind of legal risk in terms of refusing the application here?
Sorry, in terms of refuse?
Yeah, if it was refused.
Sorry. The risk is that you're going to have to come up with very clear reasons for refusal, contrary to the recommendation that's before you from the planning officer. So in the absence of very good reasons, there is a real risk of an appeal and an award for costs depending on what you come up with in terms of your reasons for refusal. At the moment, I haven't heard that crystallised, other than the concern that if you were to grant permission in this case, it would, and the officers recognise this, it would set a precedent to allow others to come back in relation to the balance of the properties on the development.
Councillor Tom Tyson.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I agree that, I mean, I'd be searching for a reason to refuse this if I could think of one, because, to be quite candid, there's a somewhat distasteful element about this procedure, in my opinion, whereby the developer gets permission to do one thing and then changes their mind to make bigger properties out of the dwellings that were originally given permission for, so that presumably they can make a bit more money out of it. And I know, for example, that there was a development in Ashwell of 9 houses where they were all given their permitted developments right back to the developer, who'd already marketed them at the increased size, incidentally. So that's a practice which I find, to speak personally, not very appealing at all. But if there aren't planning reasons as such not to do it, I think we've got to end up having to support this. And also, I mean, I would prefer if the purchaser of the house were the person to be in charge of upsizing, but if that's not to be, we can't really do much about it. And given that they've got the Class C rights already, I think we have to go with this.
Thanks, Tom. I'm sure Stephen will correct me if I've got it wrong, but I don't think distaste is a material consideration. And I'll say no more than that. Councillor Emma Fernandez.
Basically just saying the same, I think, as Tom just said. It does feel like if we give this permission, which I know we've been recommended to by our planning officers, it could be setting a precedent, and we could end up with a lot of really very large, they're already big houses, big executive houses. But as there is no material reason, I mean, that's not a reason that's good enough to refuse, is it? To say, oh, this is setting a precedent for other people to make the houses 2 bedrooms bigger. I think we probably have to approve as recommended by the officers.
Can we hear from the planning officer in relation to that particular point?
Yes, about the risk of members taking a different view is to the recommendation. Yes. Well, I think Councillor Tyson has hit the nail on the head there, and as was mentioned earlier in the discussion, the future occupiers can already convert the roofs of these dwellings into rooms without planning permission under Class C of the order. All we're doing here is allowing the provision of roof dormers, a roof extension, which would facilitate slightly bigger rooms perhaps. But the principle of developing into the lofts of all of these dwellings is already allowed under Class C of the order. So that's a fallback position which future occupiers already have.
Thanks, Tom. Councillor Martin Prescott.
Thank you. Am I right in assuming, Tom, that you were the officer that presented the original application for the development?
For the outline permission, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reserve matters, yes.
Okay. So I'd like to make just 2 points. Firstly, as a matter of principle, I don't feel comfortable being advised by a legal officer that we should or should not do something based upon the fact that we will get costs awarded against if and when the appeal is allowed. I think we need to, as a committee, we need to make those decisions. Your advice is welcome, of course it is, but I sometimes feel, and this is just a personal thing, I just feel that we're being instructed rather than advised. And that was just a point. It doesn't, as I said, it's just a personal opinion. The other point I would make is I'm not sure about whether I will support this application or not, but I do feel uncomfortable because whatever the reasons were for the officer, Tom, to originally recommend removing the permitted development rights under reserved matters. I don't see what has changed. The design of the property, the design of the development hasn't changed. Presumably the objections in terms of permitted developments for all of the properties would create, I'm not bothered about affordability, but I am concerned about the number of people and number of vehicles, number of movements there will be in what is actually a relatively small development. And I think the argument that would come back inevitably is, well, we're only talking about 2 houses out of 10 or 12 or however many it is. But we've already heard that if we give permission for 2, then effectively we're opening the floodgates for all the rest of them. I understand that with the Class C rights that all of the homeowners could have create habitable spaces in the loft space anyway, but without a dormer, that's fairly restricted. So I'm uncomfortable with it, but I accept what the legal officer has said. We have to come up with a sound planning reason for refusing it, and I can't see one.
Okay, I'm conscious I've got Councillor Peace next. Just a couple of comments I wanted to make. One is, I think we need this stage of the meeting. We are in debate amongst the committee. So whilst I've always been quite lenient, and if officers can answer a question, I think we need to be careful not to try and draw them into an open debate. It's probably unfair. I would also make. I think Stephen may wish to speak anyway, but in terms of the advice that Stephen gave, he was asked a direct question by a member of the committee, which he answered as truthfully as he could. The only other thing I would point out is I think it was possibly Councillor May earlier who asked quite a pertinent question about 4.3.5, which I think is quite relevant to the debate. Just before I bring Louise and Stephen, did you wish to comment or?
I only wish to take the opportunity to apologise to members of the committee if they thought that I was seeking to instruct them how to vote. I certainly, that wasn't my intention. I did, however, wish to highlight that my main comment was, as you've acknowledged, to find reasons for refusal. And leading on from that, I said that if you couldn't find reasons for refusal, then I felt it was appropriate for me to advise but not instruct that in fact that increased the prospect of an appeal. So I hope that's helpful.
Thanks. Councillor Louise Peace. Louise.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm in considerable agreement with the comments that have already been made, but I think what happened with this at Reserve Matters, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the officer recommendation didn't include these conditions, and the conditions were added by us as Planning Control Committee. And the reasons we wanted them was because the housing mix was very biased towards large houses. All 10 were 4-bed dwellings. Now, perhaps if we'd have had a better mix of housing that was affordable by residents in a rural village, perhaps 2, 3, 4 bedrooms, then we wouldn't have wanted to put this condition in the first place. And that was the reasoning behind doing it, because we wanted to make sure that people living in a rural village had some affordability. But as we've just heard, that's not something we can use to refuse this. So I think I'm going to be agreeing with the comments already made. But I just wanted to clarify the process because I think that was not correct earlier.
Thanks, Louise. Councillor Val Bryant.
Thank you. I just want to support Councillor Peace. That is exactly what happened at that planning meeting. And we were concerned about the housing mix. We thought that 4 was large for a house, but just about acceptable. And the discussion we had meant that we were willing to go with that. And I think that to at this stage then change the parameters of the size of the houses by the developer is, especially when the building work has started, is not quite in the spirit of what we might expect or hope for. But as it is, I don't think legally there's anything we can do about it.
Thanks for that, Val. Councillor Martin Prescott.
It's a question about process more than anything else. I appreciate you as chairman was saying if anybody wants to propose something alternative to the officer's recommendation, we have to have solid planning grounds. I get that. But you've now presented a motion that says we should accept. If every one of us on the committee votes against it, where do we stand? Because none of us has given a legal or a You said that without moving your lips, Chairman.
Yeah, and it's spot on. In practical terms, that's what would happen. I think we had this recently. I think we went through. I think at a recent meeting we went through all three options. I think we started for a proposal to defer, then to oppose, and then our process of elimination we got to accept. So yes, if I've proposed acceptance because that's how we've decided we'll do it, that the chair will by default propose accept in order to kick off the debate, because I think you and I were of agreement before that we had a somewhat funky way of doing it. So yeah, I've proposed acceptance. That's been second. That's what we're debating. If that motion falls, then it'd be down. The onus will be on someone else to propose something different.
So my next question would be, what happens if nobody does?
Now we're into grounds that I simply don't know. We sit in silence until
we may well have that situation. I don't know. I can't read.
Given we have a teacher on the top table, you'll be asked to sit there until you make your mind up. More sensibly, I'll refer to our lawyer on this, I think.
My view is that if you don't vote in favour of the motion that's been put to you, then I think it will be open to the applicant to apply for non-determination.
Sure. Sorry, Anne, did you want to add anything?
A decision needs to be made on the recommendation. And obviously your three options are you go with officer recommendation. If that's not acceptable to you as a committee, you need to decide whether you're going to defer it or refuse it. And obviously if it's going to be refused, we need a reason for refusal ideally before we move to a vote. But between you, somebody will need to propose a motion that someone else seconds for, and then you have to vote on it.
I think, and Councillor Prescott, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the scenario outlined is if my motion to accept is voted down, but then nobody comes forward with an alternative, is what would happen.
Oh, I see.
So in which case I think Stephen's scenario is probably right.
By default, you're then deferring the case.
Oh, okay.
I'd have thought. Yeah.
Could you all hear that? So do you want
to? By default, if you decline to determine the officer recommendation, the case is deferred.
Right. We have more speakers now. Councillor Louise Peace.
Right.
Suddenly that 10:30 doesn't seem...
Sorry, yeah. Traitors. If we hadn't have had this condition last time, could we have refused it on the basis that the housing mix was undesirable? Is that such a thing? So we couldn't therefore now say we refuse this because the housing mix is undesirable.
Can I come in, Chair, please? The housing mix is already established in an extant permission that's currently being built on site, and we can't go back and change that. So at the moment there is a lawful permission for 10 4-bed dwellings, and that is being built on site. So I think that debate is gone in my view.
Councillor Claire Billing.
Yeah, this just makes me really angry, because what's the point of us putting conditions on if they can then come back and apply to have them removed? It just seems ridiculous. And it kind of makes me want to think that I want to vote against this proposal, and to hell with the planning reasons, really. Sorry.
Can I remind the members of the committee we are being recorded? Councillor Martin Prescott, let's find someone.
It's like throwing a pebble in a stream and watching the ripples. I would never advocate anarchy, well, certainly not in this chamber anyway. But I do take the point, and it's a point that's been made very well by a number of members, that if there was a good reason for putting the condition there in the first place, nothing has changed. So why should we now want to take that condition away? I mean, presumably we didn't have to give solid planning reasons for putting the condition there in the first place. Correct me if I'm wrong. And my point is, why do we now need to give planning reasons to change something that we'd already agreed, presumably a year or so ago? I wasn't a member of the committee then, so I'm not guilty. But I don't understand why we need to now give a reason for something that the committee has already agreed.
Rhetorical. So, Councillor Emma Fernandez.
I don't think I was there at the original meeting, but I was wondering if there was some ground for possibly refusing this because nothing has changed, and also because of considering the amenity of the surrounding houses. Is that a material planning consideration? Because they will be more overlooked if there are dormers at the back overlooking them. Is that, I don't know whether that counts there.
I'll bring in Councillor Mantle and then Councillor Ian Mantle.
Thank you. I'm getting very concerned about this discussion. It sounds as if we were trying to use one thing to achieve a completely different objective. To my mind, removal of permitted development rights should only be used where there is a concern about the future appearance of the development. And in this case, anyway, we're not talking about somebody building 2 dormers. We're talking about somebody having the ability to do it without having to come back to the council to get a formal permission to do it. It's not as if we're talking about dormers or no dormers. I'm really finding this a little bit over the top.
Anne.
Sorry, I was looking up, going back to a question raised earlier, why it was removed on the last petition, and I've looked up the condition, and the reason why the PD rights was removed. Sorry, I need to change my glasses to read this small screen. It says it's in the interest and the character and the amenity of the area and to comply with policy D1. So that was the reason why it was removed. It wasn't removed for parking reasons. Well, specifically. It's for amenities and character. Thank you.
My memory is that it was removed in the interest of maintaining control over the overall appearance of this development in what's a fairly sensitive site. I don't think it had anything to do with all the things that have been dragged in the discussion this evening. It is purely to do with the appearance of the buildings, and we thought at the time that the insertion of dormers into the roofs of the houses would detract from the appearance of the estate and detract from the appearance of that part of Beechwood Green.
Okay, Councillor Martin Prescott.
So my question is, if we were uncomfortable then, why are we comfortable now? Again, and I'm sorry to ask, but what's changed?
I'm slightly nervous. I'm not sure whether we're judging, with respect to the committee, whether we're judging this application on its merits or whether we are trying to rerun the original application. And I'm slightly nervous that's what we're doing. But that's down to the committee to decide. Councillor Val Bryant.
Thank you. Following on from that, the last application was with a different chair, with a different committee. Maybe about 4 of us who are here tonight. We're actually on that committee, and we've got to accept what decision that committee came to without actually questioning this at this stage. We cannot actually go. We cannot undo, and that was engineer. What was decided then? We've just got to go with what's in front of us today.
Councillor Dave Winstanley.
Thanks, Chair. So based on that point, if we are to agree this tonight, then we are undermining that previous committee, because the previous committee put that restriction in, or put that restriction in place, and we are therefore undermining that, as I understand it.
This thing didn't apply to all the houses. So we're being asked to say.
Tom, as case officer, did you want to comment at all at this stage?
Yeah, I think the difference now as to going back to last April is that the applicant has received that reserve matters permission, but is now requesting that the committee make a change to just 2 of the dwellings, so just keeping things in proportion at the moment, but also has in a covering letter mentioned the guidance in the National Planning Policy Framework, which does talk about the use of conditions by planning authorities. And planning authorities should only restrict permitted development rights or use that condition sparingly. And also further in the planning practice guidance, the advice also within that document talks about conditions which restrict permitted development rights having to be reasonable and necessary. So the applicant has considered the condition imposed by the previous committee, but has come back with a supporting case based on planning guidance in the National Planning Policy Framework and the PPG. So I think there is a case there that the applicant has made. But also, I think as I pointed out earlier, these roofs can be converted to dwellings in any case. To extra bedrooms in any case. So we're just considering the physical alteration of these dwellings through roof dormers.
Thanks very much, Tom. And I think that's back to the point that both Councillor May and myself have raised on that point 5.3. I can't remember I don't have the paragraph in front of me, but we quoted earlier. Do we have any further debate? We've exhausted ourselves. In which case, as it stands, my proposal to accept, seconded by Councillor Fernandez, is in front of you. So we're content to move to a vote. I'd ask you to vote how you wish.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. And can I thank the committee for taking a lot of time and consideration over that, and quite rightly so. Item 9 is appeals. Anne MacDonald to present.
We've had one appeal withdrawn. That item is going to be coming, well, the appeal was submitted alongside a planning application. The planning application will be coming to members at another meeting, so they've withdrawn the appeal. We've had 3 decisions and all 3 have been dismissed, which is good news. 2 were for the land north of Hitchin, 1 for the car park and 1 for the agricultural workers dwelling. And then the last one was from 5 houses in Lebworth, and they've all been dismissed. The interesting point to note on the agricultural workers dwelling is it was a hearing, and it was dismissed because there was no evidence put forward that an agricultural workers dwelling was justified in that location. However, the inspector did conclude that if the proposal had been for a market house under Greybelt, she would have approved it. So we wait to see what will come forward on that side. Thank you.
I think we can guess. Right. I think we've reached the end of the road. Any questions to Anne? Councillor Peace.
Yep, sorry, it's quick, I promise.
It's fine.
At Ickleford Parish Council meeting yesterday, I was told about an appeal that's been lodged. And they said, I'm sure you know all about it, Councillor Peace. And I said, no. Is there any chance we could be notified about appeals in the same way that we're notified about applications?
Actually, live, is it a, well, what happens is the appeal comes in, but we don't make it known until we get the start date, because there's a very long delay with PINs.
Okay.
So an developer will notify to us that they've submitted the appeal to PINs. Sometimes we might get the start date within a couple of months. Sometimes it can be 18 months before we get the start date letter. So we tend not to publicise the appeal until we have the start letter.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to bring Stephen in. Before I do, I just wanted to clarify the question. When you say we in this context, as a ward councillor or as a member of the planning committee?
As a ward councillor.
As a ward councillor. I thought that's
Please.
what you meant.
Yeah.
Sure. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to apologise to members for my late arrival. I'm afraid I got stuck on the A14 for an hour and a half. So although I'd allowed sufficient time, when the A14 goes kaput, it goes kaput. So please accept my apologies.
Absolutely accepted. I think we all understand traffic. Some of us have difficulties getting from Hitchin to Letchworth here. I certainly did. I think we're done. Let's just check. I think we won. There's a closing meeting. The next meeting of the PCC is on the 23rd of October 2025, when I think the agenda will be slightly fuller than it was for this one. And the only thing left for me is to wish Councillor Fernandez a happy birthday. I'm not going to suggest we sing, but happy birthday. Thank you very much. See you all again in 2 weeks.